So, hello everybody. We'll just wait another minute. Perhaps some more people will join. The main idea is, for instance, I saw Lina, but probably she's coming joining again in a minute. Yeah, I will just walk through the results of the first course and basically give a status update. I'm also recording the status update so that people yeah can watch it before the course and know what basically happened. So if you have any questions right now, please ask. Yeah, otherwise I will just go through the status quo and then if you have questions in between, just feel free to ask. Okay. So what did happen in the first course? Yeah, the main idea, yeah, just a quick reminder, was really to build this physiologically based pharmacokinetic model of the ACE inhibitor lisinopril. And the first course mainly took care of the pharmacokinetic part of the model. So we the data curation and also the computational modeling focus basically on this part. We want to understand the time courses of lisinopril in the plasma. And the second course will mainly focus on the pharmacodynamic parts and improve some parts of the pharmacokinetic things which are not yet finished. So the main resources which we have and which also give a nice update of what happened so far is on the one hand the GitHub repository. There you can see basically all the simulations and the data which was generated until now. You have this Google document where you get an overview of most of the figure and the informations which we put together. You have the study overview. I will talk a bit more about this later, where we get and see what data was already curated and what data you will work on in the second course. And then we have the literature database where all the literature is. I think it's a good thing, like to just walk once through the documents before for the second course and also see what happened so far. So what is the status quo of the models at the moment? So we basically did the pharmacokinetic model, which consists of the blood distribution of lisinopril, going to the lung and then can go back through the gastrointestinal tract, liver, or through the kidney, or through the rest, which are all the organs which we didn't model in detail. And so can circulate and lisinopril can distribute. The interesting part with lisinopril is that there's basically no hepatic metabolism and also no renal metabolism and also no intestinal metabolism, but the substance is just excreted in the kidneys, or part of it is excreted in the feces. So mainly some things, if you give a tablet of lisinopril, only part of it is absorbed, around 30%. 70% I'm going directly into the feces. Yeah, and that's pretty interesting because most of the other ACE inhibitors, they basically unactive substance, which is activated by hepatic metabolism. And then only the metabolite is basically it's the ACE inhibitor. In case of lisinopril, it's the only ACE inhibitor which is actually the active substance itself. And there is no metabolism. Like for instance, for ramipril, it's converted to ramiprilat, and ramipril doesn't have any ACE inhibition activity, and the ramiprilat has. In the case of lisinopril, lisinopril is really the actual ACE inhibitor. And so the tissue submodels, which are of importance, are on the one hand the kidney, which are excreting the lisinopril, and on the other hand, this part which consists of absorption and of excretion into the feces. So important key points: basically, the removal is renal excretion, and we have no hepatic metabolism. So how was the intestine modeled? This consists of a handful of reactions. It's the tablet which is given, or the oral dose of lisinopril which is given, which is then going to the stomach, and from the stomach the tablet can dissolve and reach the intestine, and from the intestine either absorption is happening or the remainder, like the 70%. Around 70% are excreted in the feces. And so it's also a big difference between the oral application and the intravenous application. In case of the intravenous application, 100% of the dose reach the systemic circulation, and also 100% have to be excreted via the kidneys. In the case of an oral administration, only around 30% of the dose actually reach the systemic circulation, and 70% are like directly going to the feces. Yeah, so I would say these are key things which we implemented in the model. The kidney model is much simpler. In this case, we just have an excretion reaction which takes lisinopril and it puts it into the urine. These are like some simple mass action kinetics, and there's like one free parameter which controls how fast lisinopril is excreted in the kidneys. What we can do now with this established model is we can simulate intravenous applications, or this is the top row, or all applications of lisinopril, and can look at things like dose dependency of the pharmacokinetics, here dose dependency of the plasma concentrations here, dose dependency of the amount in urine appearing, and also dose dependency of the amount in the feces appearing. And here we see, like under the intravenous application, these are pretty high peaks, and they go down quite fast over a few hours. And then 100% of this dose is appearing in the urine. And like I said before, the kidney is the only thing removing lisinopril from the system, no metabolism. And nothing can appear in the feces because we don't have any enterohepatic circulation. So enterohepatic circulation is basically that something could go through the liver and from the liver reach the intestine again, and then some reabsorption happens and so on. Basically, this is not the case for lisinopril. So if we give something intravenously, nothing is appearing in the feces. On the other hand, if we give an oral dose, we see we have slower pharmacokinetics. It's mainly driven by the absorption, by the dissolution and absorption kinetics. And after like 5-6 hours, we have the peak concentrations. And then around 30% reach the urine and 70% reach the feces. You see here, like for instance, for the 100 micromole, which we give in a 40 milligram dose, here around 30 reach the urine, and around 70 reach the feces. And this part is just the 70% which weren't absorbed. Also, we see a pretty good linear dependency of the area under the curve on the dose. And this is also in good agreement with data which we see, for instance, here from Behrman, 1989, where we see, okay, if we just increase the dose of lisinopril, we expect that the area under the curve just increases linearly, and that's what we see here. We don't see really saturation effects, but if we double the dose, the area almost doubles. What we see here from the 5, 10 to the 10, to 10 to the 20, and 20 to the 40. So a lot of things are already predicted very well, like the 70 and 30 fractions between feces and urine. This is well reported. Other things like linear dose dependency work very well in the model, in the pharmacokinetic part. What we did in addition, we did a very rudimentary pharmacodynamic model. And in this case, it's basically just something that we can put in, which we will replace in the second course and make it more complex. And what we did in the first part is that we just included the angiotensin 1 and the angiotensin 2. The ACE is converting angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2, and the lisinopril can be an inhibitor of these reactions. We did this via simple pharmacodynamic equations, which the inhibition basically depends on some nonlinear dose dependency on the lisinopril. And if you put the simple equation here in our model, then we can calculate like the inhibition plotted here in the middle plot, depending on the lisinopril concentration. And if we see like this is the pharmacokinetic part, similar to the simulations I showed on the slide before, and we see the following inhibition. And I think two interesting things are to note. Okay, the one thing is like that we almost see 100% inhibition even under the low doses. And of course, that on the other hand, there's a transformation of this pharmacokinetic curve to the time-dependent pharmacodynamic. And that's mainly because this curve is highly nonlinear. It basically looks very sigmoidal and has like an I50 at very low concentration. So As soon as we have like some concentration, we almost have 100% inhibition. And then as soon as the concentration is going back down under this threshold, then we get a reactivation of the enzyme in the system. And this how this curve looks is basically plotted here. We see this sigmoidal dependency of the ACE inhibition on the lisinopril concentration. And you can see this has like some I50, some half maximal value of around 0.01, very low. So as soon as our lisinopril concentration is above 0.01, we have more than 50% inhibition. And so this is something very interesting here for this inhibitor, that it's a very strong inhibitor of the ACE enzyme, and even at very low dose of lisinopril, we see a very high inhibition of almost 90, 100% of the enzyme. Okay. So how does this blood circulation model look like? In the end, yeah, the total model looks something like this. We have like 3 of these spider webs, I would say. One is the lisinopril here, one is the angiotensin 2, and one is the angiotensin 1. And these are the 3 molecules we have in the system and which can circulate through it. Lisinopril can go in the system via the intestinal model. This is the submodel of the dissolution and absorption, and here the excretion in the feces. And it can leave the system via the renal excretion, especially this part here. We have then some interactions between the angiotensin 1, 2, and the lisinopril, as mainly via the ACE reaction, which is converting angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2. And the lisinopril is the inhibitor, which works here. And that's basically all we have right now from the pharmacokinetic is this part, which is pretty good. And the pharmacodynamic part is the simple circulation of this 2 small peptides proteins, which are involved or which are converted by the ACE enzyme. Yeah, that this curve looks pretty good. Here's like some comparison with the data, and we basically use the data to parameterize this curve. And so we see like also in the data, it's basically reported that at very low concentration we have almost 100% inhibition. There's more variability here, but overall, if we have high lisinopril concentration, we have 100% inhibition. So how does the data look? This is basically the status quo and where we are at the moment. So overall, we have around 25-30 studies. We can see the screen ones, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think there's 1 or 2 more. I didn't make them green yet. Like around 10 studies have already been curated, and then data be digitized and used for actual simulations. In the second course, we're trying to do the rest. So there are a few more students in the second course, so hopefully we will get most of it. And the idea is to work on the things which have high priority and basically provide complementary data to what we have so far. Yeah, what we can see here in this table, there's different things. It's more like, okay, which people, who is working on what is the status, if we have pharmacokinetic and pharmacodynamic data, if we already have this in the repositories, in the documentation, if things are uploading and so on, and also which subset of data is in here. And so the important part is probably this red part here is there's some pharmacokinetic information. This blue part, there's some information on pressures and resistances. And then we have like this biochemical substances involved in the blood pressure regulation in the angiotensin renin system. And there's like in this in this green colors. And so we can see like different studies report different things, and some of the pharmacodynamic things basically report a lot of the pressures and the biochemical things, and on the other hand, the pharmacokinetic studies often report like the pharmacokinetic data, but some studies report both. And so the idea is like we're bringing this data together so that we have like an overall data for the different things, and that our model hopefully can describe many of these readouts. So how do the model predictions look so far? Here, the first example is like how the model is predicting the intravenous pharmacokinetic. This is, we have 2 data sets so far. The one is data by Behrman, the other data by Till. And here we see basically this high peaks in the data, and our model simulations are in pretty good agreement. This is all not perfect, but we see that we have like very similar time scales and also like similar decreases here. Our model is a bit too fast compared to the actual data, but overall, this intravenous things are predicted very well. Here's also like an oral curve in comparison till when we did intravenous 5 milligrams and oral 10 milligrams lisinopril. We can see, okay, the model can basically predict both things pretty well. You can also see this dose dependency. The plot is not the nicest plot, but if we zoom in, we can see a lot that we also see this dose dependency pretty well, which I showed before in this scans of just changing the dose between 5 and 40 milligrams intravenously. And we see all of this in the data, this linear dependency. So this all works very well. And of course, the model also predicts things which we don't have in the data, like for instance, that, okay, with we would also see different amounts excreted in the urine and so on. So there's a lot of model predictions if we have additional data which we could validate. On the other hand, we have much more data on the oral application of lisinopril. So these are the simulations for a subset of the oral thing, and the model is pretty good in predicting the lisinopril time courses after different doses. For instance, here in the Moyaverian, in Ulm, Quinn 2017, Quinn 2012, Misaka also. Kochev is not so nice, but most of the data sets are, if we just simulate it with a model, like we're in pretty good agreement. And we get, on the one hand, the lisinopril well predicted. We get also the excretion rate in the urine predicted very well, and we get also the total amounts in the urine predicted. We see this, for instance, here, like urinary rates. Overall, the model already does pretty good predictions of the whole pharmacokinetic things. Here on the right-hand side, there's also one simulation with black, especially normal lisinopril, and under green, there was some green tea given. And there's like some theory about green tea is changing the absorption of lisinopril. And if you just change the absorption parameter, in this case, we can also predict this green tea co-application pretty well. So overall, this looks from the pharmacokinetic part, it looks really nice. There's still like some it's not fitting perfectly, but we also only used a very small subset of the data to fit the model. So there's definitely room for improvement on the pharmacokinetic part to improve the model parameters a bit better, that we get, for instance, here better decay, which is more agreement with the data. So, but overall, I would say this is a really good model already. And for the subset of all pharmacokinetic data, this is very nice. The model can also predict multiple doses of lisinopril. There were some studies like Berman 1989, Gautam 1987, and Neubeck 1994. And here we have some measurements of like a nice time course for the first 24 hours, and then after, I think, 10 days. And in between, there was always like this through concentration was measured. And we see we're in a pretty good agreement with, okay, how would such a multiple dose application look like? And our model predicts this pretty well. And also this urinary amounts, which were reported, are in good agreement with the data. Similar for Gautam here, where we see like day 1 is pretty nice, and day, I don't know, this is probably day 6, 7, 8, something like that. Also a pretty good agreement. There's definitely some room for improvement, but overall, I would say the curves are already pretty close to the actual data. It's a bit not so good for the Neubeck. Like yeah, the orange curves you can ignore for now. This is some renal things. But for the black curves, we see like pretty good agreement. There's very large error bars here. But for the day 1, we predict. So for the day 1, we predict the pharmacokinetic pretty good. Also for the last day, but the simulation of the renal impairment is not working well. And there's some reasons of that we don't see the accumulation and so on and so on. But there's things which are improved, can be improved in the pharmacokinetic part. But for the the model was mainly optimized for healthy controls, and for that it works very well. There are also some predictions now about the pharmacodynamics. I shortly introduced this simple pharmacodynamic model, which we coupled. It's basically just this equation which calculates then the inhibition. And if we compare that with the actual data, like see, okay, so a bit, it's not the optimal plots. Just look at the left curves here. What we can see here's like the first day is predicted. What we can see, we are pretty good in predicting how much activity of the ACE enzyme we have. So depending on the pharmacokinetic, we're pretty good at the predicting here how the activity of the ACE enzyme would go down. But what we're very bad at is like at the recovery of the activity. And the main reason for that is that in reality, this inhibition is like very stable. And it's not like as soon as the lisinopril is away, the inhibition goes back, but it takes a long time until the ACE activity is recovering. And this is we can't describe this with this simple equation, but we need a more complex model, and that's one of the main issues we have to tackle in the second course. It's like, okay, extending the model that we can get this sustained inhibition for longer times. And this becomes especially important also like for the multiple dosing. So if you look at the ACE activity after around 10 days, 12 days, we see, okay, we are, we're pretty off, like just look at the black curves here, we're pretty off at the initial phase because we are recovering too fast, but we're also really off in, okay, how do we recover afterwards? Because our model is basically instantaneously, as soon as the lisinopril is vanishing, our activity is going back. In reality, we have like some much slower processes, and it takes a few days until the activity is going back. And this is also pretty interesting because if you take a tablet of lisinopril, the inhibition will last like for a few days, and it takes pretty long. And you start basically with 100% inhibition, and it takes a few days until you really recover here. And we see this slow process also in other studies. This was the Nubeck where we see this, but we can also observe this in like Belisand and so on, where we can see like after 20, like you don't see any recovery despite the pharmacokinetics. The lisinopril is basically away after 24 hours. We still have an inhibition, which is almost at 80 or 70% here. So this is one thing where the model, where this pharmacodynamics part has to be improved a lot. It's this time dependency of the inhibition. And also related to that, some of this accumulation which we see in renal disease. With the model, we can simulate things like renal impairment. For instance, here is like one of these scans where we just decrease the kidney function over time in a stepwise manner. And what we see, the lower the kidney function, the higher the plasma concentrations, and the less or the longer it takes like for everything to be out of the urine. And if we completely inhibit the kidneys here, then we can see the lisinopril just can't leave the system anymore. Like I mentioned before, the renal excretion is the only way out for lisinopril out of the body. And then we see that basically nothing's appearing in the urine. Interestingly, like renal impairment, our model predicts that doesn't have any effect on the amounts in the feces. And this makes also somehow sense because the amount in the feces only depends on the amount absorbed. And renal impairment doesn't have any relationship to the absorption process in the intestine. So there shouldn't be any interactions. And this would be, for instance, also nice if we would find some data for, okay, different amounts recovered in the feces under different renal impairment. This would be a nice model predicting that this shouldn't change. And we can also see that this is very please just ask questions if you're.
Is there a reason why the model couples the kidney function with time?
What happens is that the kidney function is basically just decreased by a constant factor. So for this different simulations, I think 10 simulations. On the first simulation, it's just we have 100% kidney function, the second one 90, 80%, 70%. And the kidney function is constant over time. But what happens is if you have a reduced kidney function, you get like just different time courses of the pharmacokinetics. And the main reason is because you have different excretion rate via the kidneys. So the less function you have, the less per time can be put out, and as a consequence, you get higher plasma concentration, and as a consequence, you get also higher ACE inhibition. So kidney function is constant over time, but the resulting pharmacokinetic changes are, of course, dynamic. Yeah. I hope this answers the question.
Yeah,
it's
thank
more
you.
like if you change a parameter by a constant factor, but in the end, it changes your time behavior because yeah, you're changing rates. Basically, you're changing rates and processes, and these processes change other things. And so like everything will change over time. And you can see like this is often like not very intuitive, but such models can help to understand that. Like for instance, we see like even with highly impaired renal function, we don't see much changes in the actual inhibition. We get to the 90, 95% inhibition. And it's because we're still over this very low low concentration of lisinopril, which almost has 100% inhibition. So even for the renal impairment, often a discussion is, do we need dose adjustment in a population with a renal impairment? In this case, you would clearly say no, because even the low doses are sufficient. Like you're long enough over this threshold where you have like a high inhibition of the ACE enzyme, and this gets even stronger because you have like this very long inhibition. So as long as you have like a sufficient lisinopril somehow in the system, you will have like a very long-lasting, almost 100% inhibition. And here, our model is recovering too fast. That's what I mentioned. This is like, these predictions are not really wrong. In reality, we would more expect like, okay, this stays all down here. So this is activity. So meaning for the inhibition, it would all stay up here. Yeah, but often this is like these are things like which are very, I would say, it's unintuitive. Like for instance, without the model, I wouldn't. It's difficult to say, okay, how should we adjust doses? But here we can basically say, okay, for the renal impairment, it basically doesn't matter. Which is also, it can be interesting. Like it could be in the end, basically the pharmacokinetic doesn't matter much, because we all like if we're only interested in the pharmacodynamic parts. Of course, we could have like some side effects which come from lisinopril because it's perhaps inhibiting other enzymes and so on. Often you have like this, I don't know, pleiotropic effects, and you get side effects. So it could be really bad to have high lisinopril concentration. But if we only look at the ACE inhibition, it probably doesn't matter. We should see this also in the pharmacodynamics data. Okay.
Thank you.
I have another question regarding these graphs as well. So our model predicts that lisinopril, basically the concentration stays fairly constant in plasma over time with people who have significant renal impairment. Am I understanding correctly? Is this actually what is indicated in the data as well? Or do we find any indications on where lisinopril might be degraded or accumulating in the body?
I have one or two slides for the, have to see. Like basically here is like one of these data sets, for instance, for lisinopril. What we clearly see in data, like here, for instance, in the Shionori 1990 is, okay, if we have renal impairment, we get this higher concentrations and we get some accumulation. So this is clearly something which we see in some data sets. The point is we didn't look too much at renal impairment, and so we don't know, but it looks a lot like, okay, we're seeing these changes in the plasma concentration. The question if we see the same changes also in the pharmacodynamics. Yeah. One problem I have, like I'm not too sure what's going on here. If they just yeah, this looks pretty I'm not too sure what they did here, because this looks like they labeled the curves wrong or something. I'm at the moment I'm a bit skeptical about what's going on here. I'm with the orange, so I would just ignore the orange things. But you can it's probably more complicated, and often it's the more complicated part is often that you don't have a clean renal impairment. Mainly what renal impairment often is measured by is like that you have like reduced creatinine or creatinine clearance, or like some measure of like estimated glomerular filtration rate, and then you say, okay, this is basically my kidney function. The problem is that often like these people who have kidney problems also have like lots of comorbidities, and they have heart problems and have different cardiac output and are like totally ill. They're basically dying like of 5 other things, and they just also have like impaired renal function. So it's like it's a bit more complicated. That of course in our model we can just say, hey, we have a healthy patient and we just changed now the kidney function and that's it. But in this data sets, you often have cohorts which have a lot of other problems. And so to correctly simulate them, you always have to say, okay, I want to simulate this patient cohort and it has that and that and that. And that's why we in the data curation also always have to write this down as good as possible so that we can simulate the right patient cohorts. We saw that for something that, exactly, you often have changes in cardiac output and changes in kidney function, and it can be that you have basically normal kidney function, you just have much less perfusion of the kidneys, and this has a very similar effect than reduced kidney function. So that you clear less in the kidneys in the urine can have either you have less perfusion of the kidneys, you could really have like parts of your tubuli are like destroyed, and you have like some basically tissue damage, and or it could really be the other things. And that makes it sometimes a bit more complicated to look at these diseases. But I would say things like that look pretty promising, that you see large changes in the pharmacokinetic curves with impaired renal function. And here's also a log axis, so that in the end this will look similar. And so, for instance, this would be like one thing which we have to simulate in the course. And I would say the second course also like it handles somehow a bit the renal impairment and the cardiac impairment, because these are also the two subpopulations who often get the ACE inhibitors. It's the people with cardiac impairment and renal impairment. And so the one thing our model can do, like it can predict what happens in the subpopulations, and also like give like some recommendations about dosing adjustment and so on.
Would it be at all feasible?
I hope this answered something, but it's in reality, it's okay. It's not often with the model you can do very clean, and you can study it very precise. And in reality, the patient cohorts are much more complicated. That's it's also a problem for the model predictions.
Yes, I have a follow-up question, sort of. If one were to want to create a control group for the regarding the renal function, I'm not entirely sure how feasible that would be regarding side effects, but could one try to supply a steady stream of lisinopril, basically imitating the non-disposal via kidney in a healthy patient?
I didn't get that. Could you
basically using healthy patients, sort of imitating how a low functioning kidney would work by constantly supplying lisinopril, keeping the plasma concentration high?
This is
trying to counteract the filtering via kidney, essentially.
Yeah, but it's that's not how you would simulate like a renal impairment. It's more like it would be a nice I would say it would be a nice experiment to validate basically the model. So it's I could probably show this in the end, because with this model, of course, we can very easily like just simulate different constant infusions of lisinopril, and like also like stepwise infusions and so on. So if you would have such data sets for healthy patients, we could basically predict, okay, how this should look like. Renal impairment, it's I would say the more practical thing is like either you could change actual perfusion, which is one thing which changes kidney function, or you would give some like if you know how the filtration process is, often like there are specific transporters involved in the filtration of certain substances, you could co-apply a different substance which is also transported by the same transporter. So you can basically mimic, okay, what is the reduction of the transport or the filtration capacity of the kidney via giving another substance which is basically also transported, and then you have like some they both want to be transported by the same thing, and you only have a certain protein amount and capacity. So that could be one way to simulate, okay, we have reduced function of the kidney. But otherwise, yeah, things like that are always complicated because you, interesting things are, yeah, okay, good point. Like one thing like could be this that you often have dialysis patients, like if you really have like super impaired kidney function, and then there are also some data sets in the if you go to this document, there we have a subset of this renal impairment, and yeah, there you can see like this, okay, increase in plasma concentration, which we expect, or like this multiple dose and this flat thing, you see it in some of the studies. You also have like some data about dialysis patients and how would this change. So this could also be like something which we could model and which could validate like somehow this renal predictions. And overall, I would say this should work pretty well because the kidney is basically the main organ. The big problem is to figure out what was the actual kidney function of these people in this cohort. Yeah, but let's go back to but sorry. But basically this simulation is not too bad. Like here, like what we did, we just set a certain factor and then we simulated, okay, how would this look like? And then this is not a very good prediction, but we also didn't do any optimization. This is basically just going there and saying, hey, we set a house number and we have like some change parameters. Let's set it to 0.2 and see if we get qualitatively a similar prediction. So a lot of these things here, despite looking already pretty good, they are very rough things. I would say that. So it's everything which are black curves and which are control curves and healthy controls, I would definitely like say this is pretty good. All this renal impairment, cardiac impairment, and other things, it's more like, okay, we set a certain value just to check, okay, does it work? Like for instance, here with the absorption rate, we just check, can we set the absorption rate to a lower value, and would the curves look similar? And what we see, it's okay, yeah. Basically, via reduced absorption, we could explain the effect of green tea on lisinopril pharmacokinetics. If this is really the effect, we don't know. It's just, okay, our model says, okay, it could be, and it's probably also in the change of the parameter is in a sense, it makes somehow sense. It's not a crazy change in the value. It's just something which we would expect if both substances are transported via the same transporter. And this is probably also a good example for this, giving another substance which would also be transported by the same transporters in the kidneys. Here's something happening with the giving another substance which is transported by the same transporters in the intestine. So this is what I meant, like with this basically changing function by giving some co-administration which has an effect which mimics reduced function. Okay. Okay, but I would say that a lot of this is more like demonstration. We can already do a lot, but some things are clearly wrong. But it's because this is a first model version, and we're doing a few iterations, of course, to get better, and we need also like some of the additional data to make the model better. Yeah, I would say, yeah, the next steps for the second course. Certainly, we have now to establish like more pharmacodynamics data set. So this pharmacodynamics, which I showed here, like basically this sub curves and here, it's more like, okay, they had good pharmacokinetic data and they also had a plot with pharmacodynamics, but it was not the papers which really focus on the pharmacodynamics. And this is like what we're doing in the second course, really going establish this data set for the pharmacodynamics and improve the pharmacodynamics model. Like I said, we have like a very simple, just dose response curve in there. We want really a dynamic pharmacodynamics model. which also includes the other players like angiotensinogen, which is the precursor of angiotensin 1, aldosterone, and the renin. And we want this time-dependent reactivation. So like I said, no simple dose response, but more like a more complex time-dependent thing. Definitely improve the parameter fitting, despite things looking pretty well, especially for the oral things. This was like just we did just a simple run of parameter fitting. We did more data and we have more things. So we just have to recalibrate parameters, and a lot of things should already look better after that. But of course, at some point we have to run that. Perhaps I'm doing this before the second course, like the next 2-3 days. But that's something we will run during the course, and then they will update some parameters. But due to this almost 100% inhibition, it won't have too much effect on the pharmacodynamics. That's also like somehow a nice thing, I would say, for the model, that this pharmacokinetic and pharmacodynamic are somehow uncoupled, because you basically have an all or nothing response. Like either you have like a bit of lisinopril over the threshold, over this IC50, and then you have almost 100% inhibition, or you are under the threshold and then you don't have inhibition. So it's more like all or nothing. And then if we get this slow recovery, then it's basically like as soon as you give lisinopril, you have like a lot of inhibition. Yeah, and the second thing, like the one thing is like having a better description of this actual plasma concentration of these players like angiotensinogen, aldosterone, renin, also the angiotensin 1 and 2. I didn't show any predictions for that, but we want to actually predict this correctly with the data. And we want to couple that to the actual biochemical variables, to the resistance and to the blood pressure. So the ideal thing would be that in the end, we can show like the time courses of this main biochemical things, and hopefully some predictions of the mean arterial pressure or the systolic and diastolic pressure, and compare that a bit to data. That would be like, for me, the outcome of the second course, that we solve like this problems, update them, and use really now the pharmacodynamic data to go towards the coupling to the actual pressure. Yeah, and I think document. Yeah, the one is like this interactive thing, and we see we have a lot of studies where we have a lot of this pharmacodynamic information, especially where we have like 5-6 studies where we have like good report of most of them, like the renin, aldosterone, angiotensin 1, angiotensin 2, ACE activity. So there's a handful of data sets which really provide like a really insightful data how this looks on the biochemical thing, and we also have like some like here blood pressure readouts and so on. The idea would like our extended model after the second course can describe all these variables, and it can hopefully map here on the map and on the blood pressure data. Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, please, if you have time, have a first look at your paper. You don't have to work through it in detail, but just it helps like if you just have a quick read, just to have a feeling, okay, what data is like in the papers you have assigned, and also have a look through this overview data. Yeah, what we can see, like up here, we have a lot of pharmacokinetic information, but most of this we can describe very well, like this Beerman things we saw already. This curves we can describe, this multiple applications we can describe very well. Also this dose dependency, yeah, we still have to calculate the pharmacokinetic parameters from our curves and do a plot like that. But overall, this looked already, it will be very similar, like then this linear correlation. Yeah, we saw already like these curves look pretty good in the model prediction, but right now we just put them as a pharmacodynamic equation in there. But there are also like lots of reported things on angiotensin 2 and angiotensin 1, which we didn't predict that at all because we don't have the data in the dataset yet. Also, heart failure we didn't do, but we can see that we have some heart failure data. So lots of pharmacokinetic And the second part will be mainly about this pharmacodynamic part. Like I said, there's a lot of data on the actual ACE inhibition. We always see this fast inhibition, slow recovery, and we see this in different things. And we see like, okay, for most of the doses, we have almost 100% inhibition. Here we have like some very low doses, 1.25 milligrams, and there we see like only 50% inhibition. This would be also like very nice data sets for the model prediction, because there we get finally things which are not doing all or nothing, but they are more like in this intermediate range. So there's definitely like some nice studies which provide like complementary data, because most of the things we have, it's just high doses, 5 to 40 milligrams. We don't have much about this very low doses of lisinopril. Also here you can see the slow recovery, like there's different time scales here. So you have 8 hours going down, and then it takes 3 days to go up. So this is really like a very, very low recovery of the activity. And similar things we see in other studies here. You see also like the broken time axis. It takes 3, 4, 5 days until you're back to 100% activity after you took a tablet of lisinopril, which is also interesting. And it's in some way it's something good, because you want like to take a blood pressure medication which has like a very constant effect over time. You don't want to have peaks where you're like, I don't know, like every 12 hours your blood pressure spikes and so on. So, but you want something which is really basically doing like some constant inhibition. Personally, I'm not too sure if it's good to have 100% inhibition of an enzyme. It's always like if you inhibit something 100%, it's not probably not the best thing. And you also see like it's not that our blood pressure is totally going to 0. It's just changing like by 5% or 10%, because you have a lot of counter-regulatory things which are reacting to the thing. So even if you block like one key enzyme completely, like in highly relevant for the blood pressure regulation, it has only like 5 to 10% effect on the blood pressure, because your whole body is like counter-regulating with different systems. And so this is also like one thing which this coupling to the blood pressure will, it will be interesting how to handle that. Yeah, a lot of ACE inhibition. I just want to show like we have a lot of renin data, and here we also see like nice dose responses. 5 milligrams, 20 milligrams. And so we see in this other biochemical parameters here also renin activity, plasma angiotensin, and so on. We see like we have very nice data, but right now we don't have it. Like our model can't predict this right now, and we don't have the data yet in that format to do it. But that's basically what the second course will do, like working on this data and extending the model that we can then predict all this, the renin data, which we have here, like some of the aldosterone things, which we see changing, and especially the angiotensin 1 and the angiotensin 2. Problem with the blood pressure is it's, like I said, it's we don't have too much changes, 10% or something like this in the end, and it's all very rough. But in the end, if our model just predicts curves which are going approximately through these changes, then I would be very happy with this outcome. But like I said a few times in the course, on the level of the biochemical things, we still see clear responses. As soon as we go to the pressure and the resistance variables, things are much noisier, and we see smaller effects. But this could also be that we just have much larger variability between people on this pressure regulation and counter-regulatory systems, and that the whole biochemical things are still like pretty robust and pretty conserved between people. I would say that's basically what we did. Overall, I would say it's pretty good. We have a first model, and the pharmacokinetic part is pretty good. We did a first dummy pharmacodynamics model, and it's basically to show, okay, this inhibition we can describe very well, but it has a lot of problems in the recovery, and we don't have any of these additional players like renin, angiotensin 1, 2, and so on in the system yet. So that's I'll say I was happy with the first course. Like it was basically the outcome which we wanted, like after the first course, and so then second course we have to work on this second part. I don't know. If you have questions, let me know. Otherwise, the course information, I sent it by email. I'm not sure if the doors are open, but I will open and I will definitely come down at 10 to the main door of this house 20. So, but the doors hopefully should be open. And it's in the first floor and just back. But I will just look at shortly before 10 for you to be there. Please bring a laptop. Yeah, if you can install Anaconda, that would help a lot. But I would write another email and then perhaps you could set this up before Monday. Okay, that's basically from my side. I think it's also a nice summary for the people of the first course to see what came out of that. And then we would start here at this is a status quo, and from that we would do the second course, and afterwards, like hopefully have another such presentation where we then have the final results with everything the model can do. Okay, if you have questions, please ask. Otherwise, I see some of you in the next week. Yeah. Okay, if you have questions, please just ask. Otherwise, yeah, I think it's the easiest way, not so many people. Okay, then see you all. Have a nice week, and see some of you next week.
Thank you. Exciting progress. See you next week.
See you.